back to another episode of the Jarring Science Club. I'm your host, Brenda, and today we're going to be learning how rock layers can help us learn more about the dinosaurs, when they lived, what they look like, and where certain categories of dinosaurs belong in Earth's history. For this project, you're going to need some sticks or toothpicks to make a model of a dinosaur skeleton, some leaves or some other sort of object to make impressions, small dinosaur toys or figures, little rocks if you like to represent eggs or some other sort of dinosaur item, 3 colors of food coloring, some plaster of Paris, some disposable cups for mixing, and a cup to make your sediment layers. Alright, let's get started. In this activity, we're going to be mimicking the 3 different layers from the 3 different dinosaur periods, the Triassic period, the Jurassic period, and the Cretaceous period. And we're going to show some of the types of fossils that can be present in the fossil record and how scientists kind of use information to tell the different layers apart and how that helps us learn about the world. First, you're gonna need 3 separate cups. The cups need to be paper or plastic because they need to be disposable because you're gonna be mixing up plaster of Paris in them. First, fill up your jar where your layers, your actual clear jar cup where the fossil layers are gonna appear to show you how much plaster you're gonna need. Then distribute your plaster between your 3 mixing cups. Make them about even, but it doesn't really matter because the Cretaceous period was actually the longest period of dinosaur history, which means you could make it the thickest layer if you wanted. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Make our Cretaceous layer a little thicker than the other 2 because both of these lasted about 50 million years and this one lasted over 150 million years. Now you're gonna put a color, some dye, into each of your periods. I'm gonna make the Triassic period black, the Jurassic period pink, and the Cretaceous period yellow. Now you're gonna take a little mixing stick and some water and you're gonna mix up your plaster of Paris to make a little paste. You want it to be somewhat thick, but not Play-Doh-like. If you find that you add too much water, you can always add a little more plaster. You'll need to act somewhat quickly on these because plaster sets up pretty quickly. There's our Cretaceous period, Jurassic period, and our Triassic period. So now you're gonna take your clear jar or cup. I recommend using a cup so you can just throw it away when you're done because plaster is gonna harden real hard and you don't wanna break glass or plastic or anything. So first put your layers in. So we're gonna put in our Triassic period down here in the bottom because it's the longest to go. And see how we're getting some on the side here? That's actually okay because that's actually how the fossil record is too. Not everything is in its appropriate layer. Some things are out of the layer that they should be in because things move around, volcanoes can shift things to different layers and stuff like that. So that's part of the decoding that scientists have to do to figure out when a fossil actually originated from. So in this layer, I'm gonna put some of our cast skeleton down there in the bottom layer, just like that. And then we're gonna add in our Jurassic layer. And it is okay if they mix a little bit because that's what they do in the real fossil record. So here, I'm gonna put our Jurassic dinosaur. Maybe we have a preserved specimen from the Jurassic period, who knows? So we'll plop that one down there in that layer. And then finally, our Cretaceous layer, we're gonna put on top. And like I said earlier, it's the longest dinosaur period, so its layer would be the thickest. In this layer, I'm gonna put a piece of leaf. Maybe there was an old ancient tree during this period. We'll put that in there. And then I'll also put this little skeleton fragment to see what that does. And here it is. Now we will put this aside and let it dry for probably about a week, but at least 2 days. And then we're going to take a look at it and see if we can excavate some fossils. Now this little sediment layer, this fossil record that I've made has been through the ringer The original batch that I made molded, so I had to redo it. And then my toddler got a hold of it, and she has produced this interesting texturized lump. The colors also turned kind of weird, but it actually looks more like the surface of the earth now. There's a lot of texture on the top, and there's weird stuff here. So in the fossil record, scientists use several different methods to date how old something is, but they also look at the layers in the rock to determine the approximate period of when that layer was formed. And just like in this little unit here, sometimes the layers can get muddy, which is one reason why just sediment layer and fossil record dating by positioning is not the most accurate. Scientists also have to use other methods to figure out how old a fossil is. We're going to break open our little rock layer here and see what we find. I've broken it in half, and you can see the first fossil that we put in there right there at the top layer. That is our dinosaur body. And on this side, you can see the imprint of the other half of the dinosaur. A lot of times, scientists only have this little fossil impression to date something or to figure out what dinosaur it belonged to. And just how you can see that, like, it's only a little part of the dinosaur, it's just its body, it's not the whole thing. Sometimes scientists have to work really hard to try to figure out which impressions belong to what type of dinosaur, because a lot of times they're just little pieces just like this. Here you can see another section of the dinosaur's tail left in the fossil. And now down here we have our button, which represents another fossil, and this is lower down, so scientists might theorize that this little button was buried sooner, which might make it older. So combined with other dating methods, they could determine if this dinosaur was from a more recent period than this one. This one left a very good impression, so scientists would be quite excited about that. Here's an example of a mold fossil. So this piece was inside of this button in the center here. And when you take away the button, you're just left with the sediment layer that filled up the mold. And so this is an example of the type of fossil that you would see in the actual fossil record. And in some cases like this might be all that a scientist could get, and so they would have to try to figure out, okay, if this is the fossil that we have, what did the dinosaur look like? And they might think that, okay, this is what the dinosaur looked like, but as we can see right here, it was actually just one small part that fit in the middle, and there's actually a lot more to it. So that's why sometimes you'll see that scientists kind of change what they're saying about what dinosaurs look like or how they acted, or even like which ones are real and which ones aren't, because the more research that they do, the more they can figure out what actually was there. In the member portal, tell me what kind of fossils that you made whenever you created your fossil record. Here's the science. Humans are very curious creatures. We want to know what the world is like now and what it was like in the past. This leads to, of course, careers in science. One scientific career related to studying the past and Earth's history, which also includes dinosaurs, is paleontology. A paleontologist studies fossils and the fossil record to understand more about how life evolved from what it was prehistorically to what it is today, where those transition points occurred, and what ancient creatures look like, and how the Earth is different in the past than it is today based on the study of dinosaurs and animals and fossils. Scientists use what's known as the fossil record to learn about the dinosaurs that existed in the past. The fossil record is simply a name for how sediment layers of rock stack up over time and what fossils are trapped in each layer. Because scientists can use things like carbon dating and radioactive dating, they can determine how many years ago each layer of rock was formed. Scientists use two forms of dating to try to determine how old fossils are and where they fall in Earth's history. The first method is known as absolute dating. In absolute dating, scientists study the radioactive isotopes released by that material and how many of their daughter products exist in the surrounding layers. Basically, it's a pretty complicated formula that uses information on the breakdown of that material and the radioactive energy it gives off. Now, just because they're giving off radioactive activity doesn't mean that fossils are radioactive. They're just studying the breakdown of the fossil over time. The longer a fossil has been breaking down and decomposing, the more of those daughter products exist, which means that the fossil is older. Then scientists also use a practice called relative dating to compare fossils with one another to say, okay, we found these fossils in a similar place at a similar level in the soil. We're going to compare the radioactivity of each of these to compare and see, and if they're similar, they probably came from a similar era. And by using the formula of the rate of radioactive breakdown that we know works for modern things, we can then extrapolate that data back and have a pretty good estimate for how old these fossils actually are. This rock layering data gives us 3 distinct dinosaur periods in history that existed somewhere between 250 million years ago to about 60 million years ago. The reign of big dinosaurs kind of ends about 60 million years ago, and that's where you see more of the transition into modern creatures that we think and know of today. The oldest period and the lowest layer in the sediment layer is the Triassic period. This was about 250 to 200 million years ago. Scientists estimate that at this time, all the land on Earth was actually in one specific spot, so dinosaurs could roam all over the place. And they also estimate that the climate was hot and dry and much more desert-like than it is today. Scientists estimate that at the end of the Triassic period, that's when volcanic activity and things like that started to break apart the land masses, which moved the dinosaurs into their next stage of history. The middle stage of dinosaur history is known as the Jurassic period, and scientists estimate that this occurred about 200 million years ago to 145 million years ago. Because of the volcanic activity, the climate of Earth changed, things became much more rainforest-like and vegetative, which scientists believe enabled the dinosaurs to evolve more quickly and in more directions than during the deserty Triassic period. It is in the Jurassic period that scientists first believe that the bird-like evolution of dinosaurs first started to evolve. Because vegetation and plants were so prevalent during the Jurassic period, a good chunk of the dinosaurs were actually plant-eating, and this is the time when some of the very largest dinosaurs existed. After the Jurassic period, dinosaur bodies started shrinking and started evolving closer to the modern forms that we see of today in birds and reptiles. The final heyday of dinosaur period is called the Cretaceous period, and this is also the longest dinosaur period. Scientists estimate that the Cretaceous period occurred 145 million years ago to about 66 million years ago, when the modern sort of animals started to emerge. But in the Cretaceous period, some big changes happened on Earth. Because land masses were now separated, dinosaurs on different continents started to evolve differently and distinctly, just like animals today. When you go to Australia, the animals there are way different than the ones in the United States, or even from the ones in China. Dinosaurs, just like animals today, had that diversity based on where they were in the world during the Cretaceous period. During this period, there was a dramatic rise and fall of sea levels, which caused much of the limestone and chalky layer of the Earth to form. And that's why you'll see many fossil records in this chalky layer from the Cretaceous period at the bottom of seas that even get washed up and dried out in areas that used to be covered by sea, like where I used to live in Waco, Texas. At the end of the Cretaceous period, we consider this to be the last age of the dinosaur because really the only dinosaur that evolved out of the Cretaceous period were the bird-like dinosaurs. Very few other types of dinosaurs, although they exist in the world at the Cretaceous period, most of them died out. Scientists are still debating why and exactly when this happened. There are several theories for how this happened. Currently, there are 2 main theories for how this happened. Some scientists believe there is evidence to believe that asteroids hit the Earth right around the end of the Cretaceous period, causing mass extinction. Other scientists think it was just simply even more volcanic activity that wiped out a good population of the dinosaurs. But scientists don't exactly know because 66 million years ago is actually quite some time ago. In our sediment layer, we use our model to show those different periods of dinosaur life and how scientists use dating in separate layers to learn more about the dinosaurs and other animals that lived during that time. That's it for today. See you next time.